If America is in the middle of a constitutional crisis, we should probably read the Constitution. Blaze News The Mandate starts right now. Welcome in, everyone. I'm Jill Savage, joined as always by Editor-in-Chief Matthew Peterson.
Great day in the neighborhood today because it's the day I get to have a long conversation about the important stuff.
Yes, and we're continuing our summer series. And up next is Glenn Ellmers, and he has quite the resume, Matt. When you look at it, he's the Salvatore Research Fellow for the American Founding at the Claremont Institute. He has a PhD in politics from the Claremont Graduate University. And if you look back through his history, he's been a research fellow with Hillsdale College, and he served as a speechwriter for 2 cabinet secretaries. So if that long list tells us anything, we're in for a good conversation.
Oh, yeah. So Glenn, like myself, teaches a lot in the Claremont Institute fellowship programs to young leaders on the right throughout the country. And he's one of the first people I thought of when I thought of one of the biggest issues we need to talk about on the show if we're going to actually solve this problem and save America. And, the first time we talked to Charlie Kirk about statesmanship, along with Ryan Williams and John Eastman about what is statesmanship, what are we even trying to do here, right? That was the first set of interviews, which I encourage you to look at. And then the second was R.J. Prestrito, who's a Hillsdale professor on the administrative state and how the hell we get rid of this thing. How do we get all these, unaccountable bureaucrats in office and what do we do about it? And this time, I thought it would be great to just go all the way back to the beginning, to the Declaration of Independence itself, which is how America is founded. It's the first bit of law in our body of law. We start with the Declaration. It's what birthed the country. And as fate would have it, we are going to enter next year into the 250th anniversary of America itself. And the Trump administration has already begun celebrating that fact. So I thought, all right, well, let's talk about the Declaration of Independence and what the heck does that mean now? Is it still important? And how can it help us moving forward? Because we probably need that spirit once again, but we've forgotten what it even means. And so we have a great conversation about all these things, starting with a moment from JD Vance's speech, which we showed you all here at Blaze. You can find it at Blaze at YouTube at the Claremont Institute, where he was talking about the Declaration.
You and I are both big fans of Thomas Jefferson. We walk around the memorial every time we are out in Washington, D.C. But without further ado, it's Founders Friday. So here is Matt's conversation with Claremont Institute Senior Fellow Glenn Ellmers.
Earlier this month, Vice President JD Vance addressed the Claremont Institute, sharing his reflections on the essence of American identity.
If you were to ask yourself in 2025 what an American is, I hate to say it, very few of our leaders actually have a good answer. Is it purely agreement with the creedal principles of America? I know the Claremont Institute is dedicated to the founding vision of the United States of America. It's a beautiful and wonderful founding vision, but it's not enough by itself. If you think about it, identifying America just with agreeing with the principles, let's say, of the Declaration of Independence, that's a definition that is way over-inclusive and under-inclusive at the same time. What do I mean by that? Well, first of all, it would include hundreds of millions, maybe billions of foreign citizens who agree with the principles of the Declaration of Independence. Must we admit all of them tomorrow? If you follow that logic of America as a purely creedal nation, America purely as an idea, that is where it would lead you. But at the same time, that answer would also reject a lot of people that the ADL would label as domestic extremists. Even though those very Americans had their ancestors fight in the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. And I happen to think that it's absurd, and the modern left seems dedicated to doing this, to saying you don't belong in America unless you agree with progressive liberalism in 2025. I think the people whose ancestors fought in the Civil War have a hell of a lot more claim over America than the people who say they don't belong.
Glenn, there is a lot in this segment we just clipped and showed you, and a lot to unpack, and we're going to unpack that here today. But first, I want to get your take on the problem he's describing in the way that people use the Declaration. And I want you to talk about that, because I know you talk to a lot of younger people throughout the country who are smart, who are dedicated, who are patriots. And there's a certain way in which they rebel against the way the Declaration has been used by many on the left and on the right over the last 40, 50 years.
Sure. Let me just say, I love Vice President Vance. I'm glad Trump picked him. I thought it was a great speech. I thought he could have been a little clearer and a little bit more careful in his language. For instance, an error, you and I both know this, Matt, we both learned the same things in graduate school. The idea that the universal language of the Declaration means anyone who agrees with those principles automatically becomes an American or automatically is entitled to enter the United States and become a citizen is simply an error. I actually think if you understand the political theory of the founding, if you understand what the founders called social compact theory, it actually provides the best argument. The creed, as the vice president called it, provides the best argument against open borders and unlimited immigration, because the center of that creed is the idea of consent. That is, the people consent to form a political community, and no one can join that political community without the consent of the existing members. And so I wish the vice president had been a little clearer in understanding that and explaining that, because the creed is actually, I think, the strongest and most articulate and most persuasive argument against the unconstitutional, un-American activities that the Biden administration undertook to bring in millions of people without our consent.
Yeah, this is so essential. And by the way, I think what he meant to get at was this misuse of the Declaration. Anyone who says the Declaration of Independence, which of course we're talking about not only because the 250th anniversary, which the Trump administration is rightly celebrating, is coming up, which is really the anniversary of the Declaration, which founds this nation. But it's been misused for so long, and you get people who think somehow the Declaration means that we have to let everyone in, and that, equality sort of run amok, or equalism, or whatever they'll call it. Like, equality, if you take that to its extreme, all of a sudden leads to all these problems, and this is the language of the left, and how can you guys at Claremont be talking about this? And they fundamentally misread or misunderstand the founding. So this is such an essential point. Consent, what you're saying, consent of the governed actually makes it possible to say, no, we don't just allow whoever the hell wants to come here in here. But explain a little bit about how equality, I mean, after all, the most famous line is, the self-evident truth is that all men are created equal. How does equality fit into the founders' understanding of consent?
Again, so our teacher, Professor Harry Jaffa, who a lot of us studied with back in Claremont in the old days, used to say that equality and consent are two sides of the same coin, right? Consent derives from equality. Why? What does equality mean? It does not mean equal outcomes. It does not mean we have the same talents, the same abilities, the same desires, none of that. It means political equality. What's that? It means we all have the same rights because we're all members of the same species, right? None of us are angels, and none of us as a class are beasts. And therefore, no man, because of that political equality, because we're all members of the same species, and there are no angels among us with perfect wisdom to rule us, the only legitimate form of rule is with consent. No man can rule another without his consent, and that's the reciprocal of equality, and you can't have one without the other. Now, all of that's become greatly misunderstood, and equality has come to mean equity and social engineering, and that's not what the framers meant. In fact, they thought political equality would lead to unequal outcomes. That's not a bug, that's a feature, right? Equal natural rights, equal political rights would lead to unequal outcomes. And so in a way, today's equity, today's social engineering of trying to bring everyone out to have the same proportions in every field is the flip side of what the founders understood by equality.
Yeah, this is to the core of really everything. I mean, when you talk about equality now, I think people do mean, sameness in all respects is what they think. And then you get these, and you've dealt with this for years, as have I, people who say, well, it's obviously not self-evidently true that everyone's equal. I mean, we're all different in 1,000 different ways. Even within the same family, no one's truly equal. We're all different. We have different gifts and abilities, different downsides. So this is not self-evident at all. And how would you describe, the founders' reaction to that misreading? What would they say?
I have this argument all the time with very good friends of mine on the right. I've had this argument in person and many times in print even. And I ask, what is the alternative? Did you want the Justice Department under Biden and Obama to have two classes of citizens? For Hunter Biden and Alec Baldwin to be treated by one set of rules and the deplorables to be treated by another set of rules? Do you want the Justice Department to have two sets of laws, depending on whether you have political connections or not? Or do you think everyone should be treated equally under the law, right? There is no alternative to that I'm aware of, right? The only reasonable basis for legitimate government is for everyone to be treated the same under the law, regardless of your connections, your political affiliations, your wealth, and so forth. And I don't know what the alternative to that is if we're not going to be treated equal. It means going back to some kind of feudal caste system. The whole point of the American Revolution was to get rid of the artificial aristocracy of feudalism and to give everyone the same opportunities, the same political rights. So unless we want to put a new feudalism into place, which is what the left seems to want, right? You have the woke with the special privileges and the deplorables who are treated differently. I don't want to go back to another form of feudalism. And so equality before the law is the only legitimate principle that I can think of that for protecting our rights.
Yeah, insofar as we're human, we're equal before the law. It's at the heart of the American experiment. But we've lost our way, right? And in so many ways. And here there's this interesting reversal, right, where the left, as you said, talks about equity. I mean, they talk about how basically everything does need to be enforced equal. There should be equal outcomes. But at the same time, we've lost the consent of the governed. I mean, so many people out there feel like serfs or slaves or subjects. It doesn't feel like their vote matters. It doesn't feel like they're really part of a group of people who are politically considered equal, banding together to decide what they should do politically. And you see that with the immigration problem when you have millions and millions of people coming here and no one feels like they can do anything about it, right? Because their consent doesn't matter. I mean, we've been habituated into thinking that citizenship is sort of a benefits card, right? It's like you get bennies if you become a citizenship, but it doesn't really have anything to do with self-rule or governing, together. So how do you square that circle? The fact that the left on the one hand is obsessed with equality, but on the other hand, we seem to have lost this principle of consent.
Yeah, well, this is a long, as you know, a long, complicated story. It has to do with the rise of the so-called rational state, that you can turn government over to experts who know better than we do, and so equality becomes the way for the expert class to give us what we deserve. That's their understanding of equality, right? And since we're a hopelessly racist society, what we all deserve is for whites to be held down and various oppressed minorities to be brought up. And that's what they mean by equality, which means treating everyone differently, not treating everyone the same. And they justify that on the basis of their superior expert scientific knowledge exercised through the bureaucracy and through the administrative state. I would say if our friends on the right would pay closer attention to what the founders actually said and did, looked a little bit more closely at the political philosophy that animated the American Revolution, understood a little bit better social compact theory and what it meant, they'd see that the same revolutionary principles that animated the founders are the best arguments we have now for getting back our rights, for controlling immigration, for curbing the administrative state, for restoring the rule of law, for defending the decency of the family, for reasserting constitutional limits on government. All of the arguments that Washington and Jefferson and Madison made on behalf of social compact theory are still the best and the strongest arguments we have to fight the left today.
I mean, this is really ultimately about like these discussions that we've initiated for Fridays on the mandate are really about the future. It's like whenever I talk about the founders, we're talking about the American future. We're talking about where we should go. This is not a history lesson in the sense that we're just doing this for the sake of history. You're talking about ideas that are living and that could transform America. So yeah, let's go right to that. I mean, when you look at the Declaration itself, there's a number of lessons that we should take forward, if we think about the Declaration and the future of America in the 21st century. So it sounds like what you're saying is at the heart of it, we got to get equality right. Doesn't mean, sameness, everything else, but this is somehow at the core of what we need to do if we're going to move forward.
Right. And again, because equality and consent go together, the one that I like to emphasize today is consent because it's a little easier to explain because equality has become so misunderstood. And because they go together, it's easier to start with consent and it makes more sense to people, right? I mean, every decent person can see that the government under Biden and Obama was operating without our consent. We're trying to get that back through Trump's efforts, through DOJ and so forth. I mean, look at all this crazy spending that Doge uncovered that was done not even without our consent, without even our knowledge, funding all of these left-wing causes through backdoor channels. That's a clear violation of the consent of the governed. And if you can go back and recover these ideas, if you understand that social compact theory meant only those people who have consented to join together in a political community, to respect each other's rights, to acknowledge the principles of American citizenship can be members of the community, and no one can join that community without the consent of the existing members, that gives you a very clear, compelling, articulate explanation of why this massive influx of immigrants is immoral and unconstitutional, and it violated the exact principles that the revolution was fought to defend. And that, I think, is a much stronger argument than the so-called blood and soil defense of citizenship, which actually doesn't give you a very good coherent argument because it just says, well, citizens are whoever was thrown together by history and whoever has been here for a long time. Well, that's not a very good argument. Social compact theory, the consent and the sovereignty of the people, that's the best argument we have for battling the administrative state, for controlling our borders, for reasserting the sovereignty of the American people.
Yes, and we should say, I mean, a big part, really a central part of JD Vance's speech was about restoring that sovereignty of the American people. It's the word he used, and that was brilliantly said, and it was a very important point. I guess one thing that I wonder about is how do you in action change people's understanding of this principle? Because it needs to be more than, like, we could sit here and we can talk about, well, this is what the Declaration really means, and that's very important because you do have to actually understand that if you're going to be an American citizen. But the problem is that you could almost say culturally or habitually, just by the mere fact of the way this kind of weird mismatched oligarchic system or kind of, swimming around in works, you feel like, again, like a serf, like a slave, like someone who's outside the system. You feel marginalized. To use, the left's word. Everyone feels this way. They feel like I know there's billionaires as well as regular people and people who are struggling who all have the same question about Washington. How the hell does this work? Who actually rules me there? I don't know. We don't know what they're spending. We don't know what they're spending on. We don't know who these people are. The president can be a cipher. He can be like a shadow and an auto pen everything with people around him. So people really do feel as if they are not citizens. Their consent doesn't matter. What are some of the ways that you think of changing that, sort of culturally or habitually or through some kind of action? I mean, because I guess I struggle with it because you think about, well, you should vote. Like, okay. Like, that's great, but I got to have something exciting I'm voting about. If I'm just voting within the system that exists now, nothing's going to change, hence the popularity of someone like Trump, right? But the question is, like, what do I do to get out of this mindset?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it sounds like I'm not answering your question because I'm saying go back and read what they said. Mm-hmm. But I think, and by the way, you're very good yourself on this, Matt. I've heard you talk about George Washington's greatness of character and his manliness many times. And that's a great lesson. There's so many guys on the right who are dejected and cynical, and they think, there's nothing you can do about this ridiculous clown world that we live in. But if you go back and you look at the way they conducted themselves, the American Revolution was fought by manly men who wanted to defend their rights. Their slogan was "Give me liberty or give me death." And so I think there's a lot to be said for the right going back and seeing how impressive that was, right? What a spirited, impressive, bold, courageous undertaking they did. This act of statesmanship was not some academic exercise. They put their lives, their fortunes, their honor. I mean, they talked about their honor as something really meaningful to them. And I think that's inspiring. And if we go back and recapture that, it's not just an academic exercise. If we go back and recapture that spirit, we will animate the sense of American citizenship that the founders thought would be necessary to keep this experiment in self-government going.
Yeah, that's something. I mean, I feel somewhat hopeful there that we'll see more and more figures who, whether they're just pissed off enough, right? Some of these business guys just get angry and say, wait a minute, what the hell is going on here? Or whether it's younger people who just refuse to doom, as they say, they refuse to black pill, and they say, no, we're going to win. I used to think that was not as important or even a little ridiculous. But I have to say, over the last year, I feel like they were sort of right about saying, no, we're going to do this. with sort of the glory of youth, right? When you get older, you get more jaded. It's like, yeah, that's great. Go charge the hill. That's why they recruit 18-year-olds in the military. But that spirit was it was youthful, when it comes to the founding. And I don't know, you interact with a lot of these people more than most who are young leaders on the right. Do you find that there? Do you see hope for the future?
It's coming back, right? So certainly it was easy to be depressed and cynical in 2020, right? Whatever you think about the election, it certainly, regardless of whether the election was stolen, it certainly was not conducted according to the standards that James Madison had in mind, right? With mail-in ballots and ballot harvesting and all this, social media. It was the whole thing was not the way an American election should be. And so it was very easy to be depressed and cynical. But Trump came back, right? And even though a lot of us, wish things were going faster, he's only been in office for 6 months. He still has 3.5 years to go. I think he's already done great work. Doge has done great work. And it reminds you that you never know what the future will hold. This is the lesson I end a lot of my courses and my teaching on is you never know when Providence will intervene, right? Things looked very bleak for Churchill in May of 1940, and they were able to turn around the war against the Nazis. Things looked bleak many times during the American Revolution. Things looked bleak for us in 2020, and yet you never know what can happen. Trump won against all the odds, and he's got another 3.5 years to go. And so I think people are more optimistic now, and I encourage that. I think that's the right spirit. You have to keep. Another one of our great teachers, Leo Strauss, used to say, even against the worst odds, the best thing to do is to go down guns blazing and flags flying, if nothing else, but to inspire future generations to live honorably.
Yes.
And there's a lot to be said for that. And I don't think we're going down flags flying and guns blazing yet, but I'm pretty optimistic about how things are going. So it's just a reminder that if you don't despair, if you keep hoping, sometimes you win against all the odds.
Yeah, and a small band of warriors who won were those patriots in 1776, banded around, this document declaring independence. And so, talk to us a little bit about the revolutionary spirit of that, because this is another thing that drives me nuts. The right will preach these documents, or you'll hear about it in school. But it's all coded with a kind of like, oh yes, we know this, and we hear these words, and they're boring. And the idea that this was actually revolutionary, that revolutionary spirit that prompted that document, I think we see it every time, we saw people rebel against the COVID laws. It's still there in the American heart and soul. But how do we bring that back? Because it strikes me as like that's something that's needed. That revolutionary spirit of the Declaration is what's needed in this century to return to some form of constitutional government.
Yeah, and I think you're seeing it. I think, I think a lot of predictions that woke is dead are premature, but you're seeing a growing backlash against it, right? And so that's a healthy development too, right? A growing attitude that we're not going to accept this suffocating orthodoxy, this self-censorship, this thought control, and the reaction against that, I think, is a very healthy development. Just on the spirit of the founders and serving as an inspiration, especially for younger people who might sort of think it's a pointless exercise in bygone history. You and I both learned in grad school, Jefferson and Adams and Washington, these were the elites of their time. And they could have very, very easily made an accommodation with the king. They could have asked for land grants and for titles. And Adams could have said, I'll put down this rabble here in Boston Harbor. And Washington could have said the same thing in the South. And it would have been the easiest thing in the world for them to sell out for their own personal advantage, to get lands and titles from the king, and to put down the desire for American liberty just to their own advantage. But they didn't do that. They really did put their lives and their fortunes and their honor on the line to defend the liberties of their fellow citizens. By the way, the one thing I really liked about Vance's speech is the talk about gratitude and how little gratitude there is on the left, and about probably the incoming mayor of New York and how little gratitude he shows for his adopted country. The sense of common civic spirit, this sense of being in this together. That's another healthy development that I see coming back to some degree on the right. But it means not abandoning the principles of the revolution, not abandoning the creed, so-called, but returning to it and reinvigorating it and using that to wage the battle for our liberty today.
Yeah, so let's go back to the equality at the heart of the Declaration, and the idea of consent, of everyone's different, people are not the same, they're not equal, but they are equal under the law, they are equal as human beings politically, and therefore their consent is required in order to have governments take place. In some way, right? We're not all pushing. The idea wasn't we're all pushing a button, voting on everything. They knew that would be disastrous, but that at the end of the day, the consent of the people was needed. So how do you think we got to the point where all of a sudden that became the excuse for the sort of thing that Vance was complaining about at the beginning of this, where, oh no, everyone is the same, everyone's equal, therefore we'll spread democracy throughout the globe. And we can just interchange everyone with everyone else like a bunch of Lego bricks. And if 20 million people come here in a few years, that's fine. We're all just equal. How did that happen? Particularly on the right, because that rhetoric, that carried the day. That's why Vance felt like he had to make this qualification.
Yeah, well, it's a bit of a long story. It has to do with the importation of a lot of bad ideas from various European philosophers, including Rousseau and Hegel, the development of the administrative state based on rational state theory. It has to do with the sexual revolution and the cultural revolution from the 1960s, moral relativism, the idea that there should be no limits on my whims or my desires. Being free means being able to do whatever I want, fulfilling every low passion that I may have. So it's a long and it's a complicated story. It's partly intellectual and philosophical. It's partly cultural. It's partly, to some small degree, every society that becomes successful and prosperous has to guard against this danger. And the founders were aware of that, by the way. Success and prosperity can be dangerous in the sense that it encourages people to become complacent and soft and self-indulgent. And we had a little bit of that. Certainly right after the Cold War ended, we all thought, well, the enemies are gone. We can sit back now. We can indulge, become a hedonistic, self-indulgent society that just devotes its time to, online pornography and shopping and fast food, and we don't need the spirit of self-government anymore. So it's a long and complicated story about how we got here. But the key point, I think, is the left's understanding of equality is literally the mirror image of what Jefferson and Madison and Washington were talking about. For them, there's a great line, as you know, in the Federalist paper, that the different and unequal faculties of acquiring property is the first object of government. What they meant by that is government is supposed to protect our different abilities, right? It's supposed to lead to different outcomes. And that happens because when everyone starts in the same place, right? A race is only fair if everyone starts at the same place. That's political equality. And then the fastest person can win. You don't rig the race in order to make everyone finish the same way. Right. That's what the left is doing, right? The founders wanted everyone to start out equal with equal natural rights and then wind up in different places. And the left's version turns that upside down, right? Some of us are oppressors, some of us are oppressed, and it's government's job to smooth all that out and make us all equal.
Apply this
mirror image.
Apply this to the Trump administration's struggles right now. You see this is at the core of, American political philosophy. And right now you see the Trump administration engaged in all manner of battles. How do you see this principle at play in the battles that are taking place there?
Look, Trump is trying to, for the first time in a long while, is taking seriously the idea that the people in this country are sovereign. Now that's a multifaceted war. I think the stuff that Doge is still doing, it's a little bit off the radar now, but I know some people who work there, they're still plugging away. They're still finding all the misuse of money, all the misallocation. And by the way, just a little thing on Doge. Again, I wish the rhetoric were a little bit better sometimes. I don't think the focus should be so much on wasteful spending and efficiency. You can have an efficient tyranny, right? North Korea is a very efficient tyranny. We don't necessarily want efficiency. The problem is all of this stuff was done without our consent. It was an offense to our independence. It was an offense to our liberties to have money being misused in this way to support various left-wing causes without our knowledge or consent, right? And so I wish it was not so much the Department of Government Efficiency as the Department of, the sovereignty of the people or the rule of law or constitutional limits or something like that, which focuses a little bit more on the real problem. But Trump is doing a lot of things. I mean, just to get the executive branch and the bureaucracy back under the control of the elected president is a huge first step. We need Congress to do its job. That's going to be a long-term challenge. But I think Trump, he's talking about the right things. He's only been in office for 6 months. It took us, by some accounting, 50 years, by some accounting, 100 years to get to this low point in American politics. It's going to take more than 6 months to fix it. So I cut the president a little bit of slack, and I encourage people to give him a chance. It's going to take more than a few months to fix this problem that took decades or a century to get us to this point.
Yeah, well said. What strikes me about Trump is really it's astounding in a way, and I'm curious your thoughts as to why. How does it take Donald J. Trump, who is not a scholar of the Declaration, I don't think, but he understands some very important things, to reassert the sovereignty of the people and not care about, all this other crap where, just to give some examples, right? There was no one else in the Republican Party who was like, wait a minute, a lot of you are pro-life. You want pro-life judges? Okay, well, I'll give you those. That was the way he thought about that was, these are the people who voted for me. I got to give them what they want. He thinks about that. He thinks about it in this way. How does it take Trump? And why did all these other people not get this basic point that you actually exist to allow the consent of the governed to flourish?
I think we underestimate how powerful the orthodoxy is, the establishment orthodoxy. It's a bipartisan phenomena. I would say, unfortunately, the majority of Republican members of Congress are not very reliable. They've bought into the establishment orthodoxy. They don't want to rock the boat. They don't want fundamental change. This is a big problem we're going to have to fix over the long term. And Trump has always been an outsider. In a way, the fact that he is pretty clearly not an intellectual is probably one of his most important virtues, which means he hasn't bought into all the intellectual BS about the scientific class and the rule of the experts. And, Trump doesn't give a flying falafel about what most experts tell him. His biggest mistakes in the first term were when he deferred to the experts, right? Like Fauci and Bricks and the rest of them. He's better off following his instincts, right? His gut tells him this is right and this is wrong. And we live in such a weird, deranged time in which this overwhelmingly powerful official establishment orthodoxy, which has been destroying American liberty for 50 years, is so powerful and so bipartisan that it takes a kind of anti-intellectual, manly, independent, weird guy who runs by the seat of his pants to do the right things by instinct. And in a way, you wouldn't always want that under normal circumstances. But right now, that's actually what the country needs. And so I'm a pretty big defender of Trump's virtues, acknowledging his vices, but that kind of radical outsider who's never accepted the establishment orthodoxy is exactly what the country needs.
Yeah, it is just remarkable because there's no one else who has done any of this on the Republican side for decades or even tried. And now we at least see the right fighting and trying. I wouldn't say everyone in the administration is on board, but much better than last time, and Trump is on board. He's working long days. This is what he does now. This is how he's going to, essentially die in his public career. He's clearly locked in, as the kids say, and this is what he's doing. So let's talk about the obstacles to that. Both of us can easily go back to the before times. Everyone's happy right now because we see Trump doing a lot. A lot of things are happening. It used to be nothing ever happens. Now I say everything happens all the time. I mean, that's the news cycle now. It's a great time to be doing what I'm doing. But when you look at it now, the obstacles that we were talking about a few years ago, because you said earlier, mentioned woke hasn't gone away. They haven't gone away. And if we're honest with ourselves, we would have these discussions at Claremont sometimes where you'd say, look, if you did do the thought experiment where you take the founders writing the Declaration, right, and you put them in the society now, I mean, I don't know if they even think it was worth, it's like this is so far gone, right? And when you start working through all those issues, that's a very dark scene, right? Because these people were willing to revolt for, very serious reasons. But the way in which, our rights and liberties, the way in which our consent has been taken away is daunting, right? To when you look at it. And so on the one hand, I don't want to see people, doom and black pill and say, oh, this is always terrible. But politics is politics. It's messy. It's astounding what's happening now. We have never seen anything like this happen in our lifetimes. On the other hand, we don't want to gloss over the fact that a year ago we were saying in a plausible way, at least I remember in private conversations, I was saying to people, if you rewrite the Declaration of Independence now, man, you have even more grievances to some degree than you did then. And so it'd be interesting to get your reflections on that moving forward. I mean, what would some of the grievances be now? And because that could help embolden a lot of people on the right to continue this fight that Trump has started.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the whole establishment orthodoxy, which includes the government bureaucracy, but also academia and popular culture, is in a war against human nature. Lincoln famously said that both the North and the South read the same Bible and prayed to the same God. We are so far from that now, right? I mean, at least during the American Revolution, England was still a Christian country. It still recognized human nature. Both North and South still read the same Bible and prayed to the same God. We've even lost that. I mean, the left now is in a war against human nature. It doesn't recognize the authority of nature. It thinks you can turn little boys into little girls by giving children, hormone therapy and surgical reassignment therapy. A Supreme Court justice says she doesn't know the difference between a man and a woman. I mean, we're much worse off. And that points to the two challenges we have. And one, Trump is focusing on necessarily, he's the elected president, so he has to focus on the institutional challenges. But the other great challenge we have is, and this is where the culture people, in terms of the creed and culture debate, are right, is we've got a tremendous amount of work to do to recover the habits and the attitudes and the spirit and the opinions among the people that make self-government work. That is very, very degraded now. I mean, even if we get out the millions of illegal aliens who really, have no desire to be Americans, as far as I can see, didn't come here with the desire to be Americans. Even if we were to expel the 50 or whatever million illegal aliens, we've still got a lot of work to do with the people here who've lost touch with all the important moral, political, intellectual, cultural habits and opinions that are necessary to make self-government work. So we have an institutional problem, and we have what you might call the problem of the people, right? Mm-hmm. You could call this the form and the matter. We've got to fix the forms, the institutions, but we've got to fix the matter. That is, we need to get the people themselves back to the kind of spirited, moderate, virtuous habits that make self-government work. And that's a very difficult and long-term project.
Well, I'd say there's two ways to do that in terms of education. One is formal education, and the kind of stuff that we do and that you do so much of at Claremont is so essential to teach leaders on the right these things. And the other is what we're doing right now, which is media, right? For everyone, which surrounds us all throughout our lives. And so this is really, what you point to is a task of statesmanship when it comes to educating people, either through direct education or through media itself. It's so needed right now. And, we're grateful for the work that you do at Claremont and have done for a long time. And
I'm grateful for the work you do, Matt.
Yeah, we're doing it. It's a great time to be alive. I have to ask you though, because you also spent time in the federal government, I believe as a speechwriter, right? Maybe among other things. But so you were in the federal government for a long time. What sort of advice do you have for both the audience watching and the people in that administration in order to actually implement Trump's agenda and the mandate?
All right, so I was there before Trump, and so that the revolutionary spirit wasn't really there. Unfortunately, I was in a Republican administration that was sort of part of the old problem, right? It was pretty conventional. It was part of the establishment orthodoxy. So I would say, and by the way, a lot of the Claremont Institute fellows that I've had the privilege to know and teach are in the administration now, some in pretty senior positions, and that's encouraging and heartening. I would say, be as revolutionary as you can. Take Trump's bold spirit, take his the spirit of take no prisoners. Don't listen to what the cowards and the timid people tell you. Push as hard as you can. If you're in a low-level position, you can push as hard as you can because someone's going to try to stop you somewhere up and down the line. So there's no reason to hold back, right? You can't go too far. So I would say push and be aggressive as possible in the most prudent way, without causing damage and without doing anything illegal. But push the president's agenda as hard as you can. The problem that we're facing is not that we're going too slow, it's that we're not going fast enough. And so everyone who's in a position to put the pedal to the metal should do it.
Amen to that. We want to see more of that. And we talk about that every day and try to encourage those people because right now, as you know, there's other people in the ear of the president and everyone in the administration who's saying, "Oh, we should not focus on this. We shouldn't go this hard." And I mean that's pretty much Washington as normal, right? We were saying the other day on the show, Mike Howell said, will MAGA get eaten by the swamp, or will the swamp eat MAGA? Or which is going to happen? Is going to the worst thing that could happen, right? Is my greatest fear is that MAGA Maha gets subsumed into Washington D.C.
Right, absolutely. Which is why every carpe diem, seize every day. I mean, my friends there, anyone who's listening, anyone who's had the opportunity to be educated by Claremont, go in every day with the attitude, I have to make this day count, achieve as much change as possible, be as revolutionary as possible, as radical as possible, because it could all grind to a halt tomorrow. So just full throttle every day.
Glenn Ellmers, thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt.
That is another great interview. There's a ton to unpack there, MP. Glenn Ellmers is a very smart man, as everybody there can obviously tell from that great interview. So what are some of the highlights for you? I looked at restoring sovereignty, the social compact theory. There were so many things that we could dive into right now, but what stood out to you?
Well, I mean, the first and fundamental thing, which Glenn explains well, is just why the Declaration says all men are created equal, and that's a self-evident truth. And they meant human beings when they said men, by the way. You have to go through all these modern, deconstructions of the Declaration. But the point was, insofar as we are political creatures and we're all human, then consent is necessary for governance. Otherwise, you have tyranny or slavery, and that would violate what it means to be human. So that's the claim. And the problem is that that's been so caked over with layers of BS, with this idea that no, somehow that means everyone's the same, which obviously is not self-evident because we all have different talents and different downsides. The idea that somehow this means we need to enforce sameness so everyone has the same, outcome in the race of life, as Glenn said, that's all ridiculous, and we need to get away from that. But we can't lose the fundamental fact that if we are all equal politically, we have to band together and in some way consent on what governance should be, then you look around and you say, there's a lot of crap we got to get rid of because we're being governed without our consent all the time. And that recovering that principle from the Declaration seems to me the most American thing you could do to move this country forward.
And if we're going to go down with guns blazing and flags flying to inspire the future generations.
Okay, so Jill hits upon the other thing that I thought was a highlight here. I mean, Glenn is great. Ellmers is great because he's not your typical academic. He did work in government and do other things. And he knows firsthand because he was in those sleepy Republican administrations, right? He knows this is it. You got to fight now. And the people, he understands the mandate. He knows, and his advice to people in that administration was, you have to 100% all the way to the wall. You got to be fighting right now for this agenda with leave nothing behind, leave nothing in the tank. Because if we don't do it now, we're going to be in serious trouble.
That is my biggest takeaway from the entire interview, is just he was going out and saying, seize the day. You never know when it's going to come through, and you're going to get pushed back anyway. So just go as fast and as hard as you can, because like you're saying, this is it for this potential generation. Like we look at this and we understand, but I want to make sure that everybody in the administration knows, and we talk to them quite a bit. We know that they feel that sense of urgency, but every now and then, even if you're doing the greatest work out there,
right,
you still need a pep talk every now and then, right? Like the football coach still needs to come into the locker room at halftime and say, hey guys, I know that we had the plan, but let's make sure that this is what we're going to be doing here now as we go into the second half of the game.
Yeah, because again, it's like these people, you take over a pirate ship and it's a few of you and your bros and you go into the captain's chambers, but everyone else on the ship is against you. That's what taking over. That's how lucky you are when you take over a federal agency. Everyone there hates you. Everyone's going to try to thwart you. And so you get ground down by that. And then of course, just like in any political administration, there's other people who aren't really like that much down with the cause, and they're kind of backbiting and all that kind of stuff, just like any other workplace. So you do get ground down and beat down. And that's why, that's partly why we need to return to a lot of this older wisdom, because it's not so much about, it's not a history lesson. It's not boring. These are the important things that we fight for. This is what should drive us and give us goal, vision, purpose, and also that from the coach to say, this is it. Like, we got to fight for that inch, and people in the administration need to hear that just like anyone else would.
And you hear Donald Trump going out there and he gives all the speeches. He is like one of the best motivational speakers that you can find, because you never know what he's going to say. You have to hang on to every single word. JD Vance, we've seen speech after speech where he just crushes it. But I would look at it and say, okay, you know what? If you're in the administration right now, DNI Tulsi Gabbard, your job is to outdo what she did this week.
Exactly.
Next week, go one up what Gabbard did. And if everybody is thinking like that, we are going to have incredible results for this country.
Yes, we want to race to the top, not the bottom. We want people outdoing themselves for fame and honor, right, for doing the right thing. They should get fame. They should receive honor, just like the founders, for doing the right thing. And that's what we had in the founding generation. That's the spirit we need to bring back. You got your Jefferson, your Madison, your Hamilton. A lot of times they disagree. I know you're partial to Jefferson because you share a day
My birthday buddy.
with Thomas Jefferson. Shouldn't surprise us, really. Listen to her. But
Yeah.
this is the spirit of all those people fighting, sometimes not agreeing, but down with the cause and trying to outdo each other for the sake of the country.
It's going to be Pam Bondi's week. Okay, maybe not, but we can have high hopes. We can go through it. You know what? Everybody was talking about seizing the day. Everybody seize the weekend. Have a great one, and we'll see you back here on Monday.
Yes. Love it.